On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, we're discussing where the Thunder sit ahead of the preseason as the injuries continue to pile up for Oklahoma City.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. On today's show, joining us is Nick Crain at Crain NBA, the Uncontested podcast, Thunder on SI owner and publisher and extraordinaire and amazing writer, Nick Crain. Crain, how are you doing today?
I'm good. The season is close. I know it's close whenever I get to see you and our other media buddies. I think we'll probably talk about Media Day a bit on the show today, but just overall, like, it's good to be back, man. Like the entire summer of just rumors and trying to find things to talk about is officially over. Like, we have things, like we have injuries and we have expectations, although Oklahoma State doesn't like those expectations. They made that very clear at Media Day. Nonetheless, exciting to be here.
We have possibilities, as the Thunder would say, to go and handle it. I think it's so fun, especially whenever you're mentioning what to talk about. We actually are able to plan out stuff to talk about instead of having to wake up every day wondering what can possibly be out there to kind of write up and talk about. But this is going to be a lot of fun. One of the things that happened yesterday at training camp actually came like an hour after training camp, whenever we got a text that Jaylin Williams, J-Will, is out for the preseason. He'll be reevaluated after the preseason with a hamstring strain. So it's important to note that's just a reevaluation date. Same with Kenrich Williams. Both of them reevaluated post-preseason, not necessarily returning post-preseason. So whenever you look at this Thunder roster, I think the depth has been the biggest and the biggest constant and the praise of this team. They're so deep. They can play 10 to 13 guys a night. But you re-examine things right before the preseason, and Nikola Topic is taking up a roster spot. He's out for the whole year. There's a roster spot that's completely empty. So that's two roster spots that for the entire season give you 0 minutes. And then Kenrich Williams and J-Will are both out for the preseason, and we'll see if they linger into the regular season. So if that does happen, does that change your mind at all about the Thunder's depth or about how the Thunder should handle this open roster spot?
You know, the Thunder has tremendous depth. Like when you think about a fully healthy roster, so much depth, almost to the point where I think if you and I did an exercise or we tried to like allocate minutes on a nightly basis, like there's really not enough to go around. Not to say that injuries are good or a thing that you want to happen, but this is a team, especially a guy like J-Will and Kenrich Williams, and obviously Topic is a whole different story, but those are guys that, like, even in the playoffs last year and on many nights during the regular season, were not big minute kind of guys. So Oklahoma City's fortunate that it's not one of their top, I don't know, Rylan, I'd say neither of those guys are in their top 9 or 10, if I were to project. Maybe like right around the 9 or 10 mark, but like there's a lot of players that would be getting minutes over them, even if they were healthy. So long term, I don't think it changes my view of Oklahoma City. In fact, if we're going to do a Sam Prestiism here, I think that might actually be an opportunity for Oklahoma City in the preseason. Like, those guys, again, weren't going to play a ton of minutes, but that's 2 less bodies now that will be getting minutes in general, to where other players can step up and get more minutes, not just in like the end of the preseason, the games that the primary starters don't play at all, but even in the early games where it's more of a traditional rotation, some other guys will get a chance. I'm curious who you think this could benefit most as it relates to like the preseason minute allocation.
Yeah, I have to agree with our writer, Ivan White, as you'll see that article come out on Friday, of Ousmane Dieng being the beneficiary. And it's for a simple reason. Number one, he was always going to have to play a lot in the preseason because you have so many questions about Ous, and you want to see, can he stick in the NBA? But look at these two guys specifically, because they had already budgeted for Topic. They already budgeted for not having that open roster spot. So those two things, yes, they do matter in the sense once you start getting injuries, you have to talk about those two things. But the Thunder already had planned for that. When you look at the two injuries, Kenrich and J-Will, this Thunder team, I don't think is going to abandon small ball. Like, I think that we get swept up into, like, they have Chet now, they have Hartenstein now, they can play big, they can always have one of those two guys on the floor. They're not going to just totally abandon small ball. That's like an identity and a principle of what they do. And the only small ball center left is Ousmane Dieng. And so, like, I think that if you don't want to go into the J-Dub playing center like they did at the end of the last season early on, because there's no reason for him to get banged up playing center in the preseason, it's going to have to fall on Ousmane Dieng to be that small ball center. And this is a massive opportunity for him. He talked at media day about wanting to attack every single day. And if it's kind of now or never, it feels like for Ousmane Dieng, to no fault of his own. I think he's progressed pretty well these first 2 years. In fact, the organization would say he's right on track with what they expected. But this team is not on track with where they expected. This team is miles above it, to where you can kind of, to no fault of your own, get left behind a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great point. While it is a positive opportunity for Ousmane Dieng to play minutes, it's also additional pressure in some way because, like you said, kind of now or never. Not to say if Ousmane Dieng has a poor preseason, that does not mean he cannot develop into a contributor in the upcoming regular season. Does not mean he doesn't have a pathway to becoming a good role player at the NBA level at some point. But this is like the test for, hey, the first 15 to 20 games of the season, health aside of the other players on the roster, especially what we've noticed in the past couple of years, Rylan, is the window before the G League season starts. Mark will give opportunity to players just to see what they look like. AJ Mitchell, Dillon Jones, guys that may not be in the rotation in January, February, March, will absolutely be getting some kind of opportunity in the early part of the season. And so for he's probably going to get more of an opportunity early now. But this is his audition to actually earn early season minutes. And whenever Mark does want to call on one of the guys that are still developing to go get minutes, will pop in his head and say, let's see if he can build upon these things? Or will someone else like Dillon Jones kind of jump him in the rotation even very early in the season? That's the big question. It's an opportunity, but it's also pressure in my mind.
Yeah, and you mentioned Dillon Jones, and this is where I think that the preseason, like, this is the biggest preseason storyline there really is, because I think even the bigger questions, like who's going to start, we're not going to know that after preseason. I mean, I would imagine that Mark will have a different starting five every preseason game just to keep that thing kind of under wraps. But no matter what, I don't think we're going to know the true answer. With this question, if these things do linger, and again, they won't have a small ball center, the only other option would be Dillon Jones to play small ball center, and his unorthodox game and his physicality, it leads you to believe that, like, hey, I would trust Dillon Jones right now to go on the floor and bring the aggressiveness necessary to play an undersized center position more than I would trust Ousmane Dieng to do that. And if that holds true the entire preseason, then you're passed up by another guy. It's a point where you really want to see take that next step, because you've seen him do it in the G League. Like people do not understand just how good his G League season was a year ago. And like, people get it wrong, even sitting in that media room asking Ous questions. He was not able to just get the ball and go out there and jack up shots and be the focal set of the offense. The Thunder and the Blue did everything that they could to develop him as a player who, yes, he did start, but he only played in 5 to 8 minute segments, just like he would in the NBA. So he had to continue to be ready for those opportunities and be impactful for those short stints. And then he wasn't the main focus of the offense. Clearly, he got to do a little bit more than he would in the NBA, but he was also playing a lot off the ball. He was also playing a lot as a cutter and trying to use his physicality, and had a career high in dunks last year, getting to that rim, playing with more force. It's just not translated to the NBA level. You even saw one of his 3 summer league games that not translate there. Yep. It's got to come around. And you almost just hope that he makes different mistakes, right? You almost hope that he just at least secures the aggressiveness and the forceful play, and maybe something else is lagging behind, but at least that box is checked.
Yeah, with him, my viewpoint of him as a prospect is certainly more perimeter oriented. Like, he is 6'11", like he is a huge human being. Maybe, just maybe, being pushed into this role where he's more of a small ball center. When we say small, it's not because he's short, it's more because he's just not built like a center. He's a bit more wing-like. Maybe this is like what he needs to like find a groove and be forced to be a bit more physical and aggressive. And for all we know, like, I know the organization is open to all developmental paths. Whatever position, although they don't really play positions, results in him being the most impactful player, they're open to that, I'm sure. Maybe we change our mindset as media members of like what Ousmane Dieng's role on this team is medium to long term. Maybe he is more of a small ball 5 or a traditional 4. Maybe that's what he is versus this like, you can still pass out of those positions, but I think today maybe you're different. I view him as like a combo forward, like a 3 that can sometimes play 4 that is on the perimeter a bunch and secondary creator. But maybe it's not him, or maybe that's him down the road, but in the next year or two it's not, so this could be an interesting opportunity to see him in a role that we don't see as often.
Yeah, and that's going to be just so fun to track this preseason, because he did do that in the G League with a caveat of, like, in the G League he did play more so 4/5 than 3/4. But as you know, the G League is set up to where there's rarely going to be a true center on the other side.
Bruiser.
There's almost never going to be a true center
Yeah.
on the other side. It's just like Summer League. These NBA organizations want to get as much opportunity for wings and guards as possible. That's what they find to be more valuable. That's what they find to be more, developmentally rewarding for their organization. So you can really get away with it way more in the G League. And so you don't really know if that was by way of, hey, they want to get Oos opportunities at the 5, or hey, we can just afford to do it because everyone else in the G League is. So finding out that answer in the preseason to see if he fills those small ball center minutes will be very fun. But we'll talk about Media Day vibes as we talked Ousmane Dieng Media Day a little bit earlier. We'll talk the whole Media Day all coming up. But first, one say right now about our good friends over at Game Time. Game Time is incredible. Game Time is just awesome. And I love it because, number one, it's the lowest prices every single day. They're so confident that it's the lowest price guaranteed. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you somehow find a lower ticket, which you will not. My 2 favorite things from this app, though, along with the lowest price, is number one, view from your seat. Nick, I have not been to every arena in the NBA or any arena really in Oklahoma. I haven't been to all of them at all. I haven't been to Lloyd Noble. I haven't been to Galabaiba, whatever it's called up there in Stillwater. I want to make sure when I'm getting a ticket, I get the right vantage point for myself. And you can do that at View from your seat with Game Time. They also have their all-in pricing, which is so great. So it's just right up front pricing. There's no surprise fees at checkout, which I cannot stand from other places. So make sure you check it out today at Game Time. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I'm Rylan Stiles. Alongside me is Nick Crain. You can go check us out at Thunder on SI. Nick, what were the vibes like? We were together again like a Buck Owens song on Media Day. What were the vibes like for you in that room?
Definitely different. Even like last season, we knew this team could be something. I don't think any of us thought that they were going to be what they were. So different. Like there was anticipation. There was some more national media in attendance, which is something that I think is indicative of a team that has kind of arrived and is ready to be on the national stage more often. The vibe though from the players was very similar. Like that was maybe like, I know that's an organizational thing and that's like a trickle down effect. And I think it's the right mindset to have, frankly, but you look around the league and I don't think there's anything wrong with this, to be clear. In fact, I kind of like the confidence, but you look in like Dallas and Luka is straight up saying championship is the expectation, like straight up. Other teams around the league are talking championships and goals and like it's all or nothing. Oklahoma City still, for better or for worse, has the vibe and the messaging that we have no expectations. Like we're going to go into this with a blank slate. Last season doesn't matter. It's all about this season. I think they all know like they're really dang good. But if you were somebody that had no idea the landscape of the NBA, never watched an NBA game, and you sat in that room, you wouldn't have known, other than maybe some of the questions the media asked, that that's a championship contending team or a team that has the ability to be in the running for a championship this year.
Yeah, I mean, this team, I think, was going to play their cards close to the vest because there's really no reward for not doing so. Like you don't get a reward for saying on media day we're going to go win a championship. Nobody truly remembers that if you
Yeah.
do go win it, and if you don't go win it, well then you're just
The
the laughing stock.
receipts.
I mean,
Yep.
you're the laughing stock, and like if you go and just say we're good enough to win a title, we expect to win a title. Yeah, if they did win a title, there'd be Thunder fans all over Twitter that would clip that and replay it. That's a very small niche group. Nationally, people just move on to the next story. And then again, if you fail in the second round or Western Conference Finals or lose in the finals, even that's going to get all brought back up. And I just think that there's no real game to being over the top. I thought that the vibes overall were really high for the Thunder. It was just more so the quiet confidence that you mentioned. And I mean, you look around at like what Trey Murphy said about starting lineups and what other players have said about starting lineups. Not to say that what Trey Murphy said was bad. It's just not the 100% great answer that you would want, right? Like there's a little bit of red ink on his answer. There's no red ink so far on the Thunder's answers about starters, from Hartenstein saying that they'll buy into any role that is put before them. Chet saying he's open to anything. Like that's what you want to hear from these guys. Even if it's just forward facing and not what happens behind the scenes, you want to hear that outward from these guys. And they aced media day. I think they didn't create storylines. And honestly, Nick, even though our jobs would love if they created storylines, that's the goal of media day, because the only storylines that ever come out of media day are all terrible or just funny memes that we forget about in 2 days.
Yes, 100% agree. I think too, one of the themes or kind of takeaways from media day big picture came from the new guys, Isaiah Hartenstein and Alex Caruso, who had spoken to the media prior, but now they've kind of been around the team a little bit and had some more insight into their experience with the organization and some other guys. There was a couple of comments made that like, and this has been talked about in the past by Sam and Mark and even others around the league. It's a young team, but they're very professional. And I think it's telling that both Isaiah and Alex had comments about that. How the locker room is very professional. Like kind of that age is just a number thing. Like the average age of the team is probably 23 years old, but they carry themselves the right way and they take things seriously and they work very, very hard. And I think you saw that like additional maturity on top of the fact that they were already a professional team, like Cason Wallace as an example. Him at media day last year, granted he was a rookie and it was probably his first time speaking to us. Completely different in my mind. Like his answers and his confidence and the energy he gave off was just very different. And I think that's an example of like these guys, although young, are still developing as people too. And there was a couple of guys like that where it was like, you know what, that was one of the better interviews we've ever had with this guy.
Yeah, I thought Cason was the best interview we've ever had with Cason at media day. I mean, he's came a long way, and I think that part of it is like you're saying, regardless of what's happening on the court. Cason was 19 years old last year, and with all due respect to Kentucky basketball, I know it's a mega giant, but like I don't think that he was, given quite the bright lights of like an NBA media day, an NBA training camp. Not to mention that like in Kentucky, like you can just automatically have more confidence because you're a 5-star, you're going to start, everything.
Yep.
Whereas like a year ago at this time, like we had a wrong assumption that Case would be like these other rookies where he'd play some with the Blue, he'd play some with the Thunder, and then he made himself indispensable and just never went down to the Blue and played 82 games for Oklahoma City. So I just think that there's just a different vibe on the court, but also off the court. As like, here's a 19-year-old guy who's now been around the block a time or two. I don't think that Case will ever like give up any government secrets, but none of these guys really will. But I do think that he just had a whole different level of, and I hate to say this part because it feels like it's speaking for him, but it came off as a whole different level of enjoyment compared to like last year, where it was kind of like another thing he had to do, and he was just kind of like more reserved from it, if you will. I mean, last year we talked to him the day of OU Texas, and he's a guy from the Dallas area, and we asked him if he's ever gone to the state fair and what his favorite food is. He says, "Well, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say my favorite food." And it's like, you can say you like a funnel cake, man. It's all good. And so like I just think that like that to watch these guys grow on the court as well as off the court and find their voice and find themselves, I think is really cool.
It is, and not a media day thing, but I love your point you just made of Cason being a guy that this time last year we didn't think was going to be with the Thunder a bunch, like play the Blue. that's the importance of my comment earlier of Mark playing guys before the G League window opens, because sometimes it's not a G League guy. You were excited to go watch Kaysen play with the blue and ball out and show some of the things. Didn't get the opportunity because he was too dang good early in the season. He ended up being a primary Thunder guy, and when he finished 6th in both minutes per game and total minutes, and then 5th in the playoffs. So not to say that like a Dillon Jones will do the same, but it's an interesting concept that, especially with all the dominoes falling the way they are, if Kenrich and Jay Will, like you mentioned at the top of the show, reevaluated after preseason does not mean back in the rotation and healthy after preseason. Dillon Jones, for all we know, could maybe not 5th or 6th in minutes, but he could be every other night rotation guy that doesn't get a lot of time in the G.
Yeah, I think that you don't want to rule it out, because whenever you just look at those two players individually, I think that those are the two guys on the roster right now, with Oos as well. But those are the two guys who you look at right now and say, yeah, they could spend a lot of time down there with the blue. But man, like, for one, Dillon Jones, I've been asking these guys all training camp about Dillon Jones to try to figure out simply what is his position. Like, forgetting about rotation, forgetting about minutes, like, what position is he playing with you guys on the court? And so we'll have a story on that coming out for SI Thunder over the weekend. But these guys talk glowingly about Dillon Jones as a little tease for that article. And the Thunder clearly love him. They tried to draft him last year. They went up and got him this year with 5 second-round picks. Same thing with AJ Mitchell, though. Like, AJ Mitchell, they had to pull off a chain of trades on day 2 to go get him at 36. And when you watch AJ Mitchell, he fits this Thunder system like a glove. And so whenever we understand that these young guys will be given the opportunity, and they both are valued by the organization as a leg up, and one of them fits it like a glove, the other one is unorthodox, just like how the Thunder like to play. I mean, it wouldn't just be stunning, it wouldn't be jaw-dropping if they did crack the rotation.
Yeah, I'm with you.
We'll see how that ends up unfolding. But coming up, we're going to put Nick Crain on the hot seat before the preseason. What are your expectations this season? But first, once there right now, about our good friends over at FanDuel. Go check out FanDuel right now, because they are awesome. You can start the season with the bang, a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So whether you're in the middle of your lunch break, want to bet on a game, or in the middle of the game itself, you can go check it out, because you can do live bets, prop bets, spreads, over-unders, everything that you want to do, you can do at FanDuel. And when you go right now, you can get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed, when you place a $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com, look at the odds and include, whenever you kind of want to bet on these games, you can look at the odds, include your expertise, and make your prediction. Because if you listen to Lockdown Thunder, you know a lot about the Thunder. And so, for example, if the football lane is not yours, you can already bet on the NBA. And not just future stuff. Like, they already have lines out for opening night. Thunder in Denver. Thunder are 2.5-point underdogs at FanDuel.com. You can jump on that pretty early if you want to at FanDuel.com. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. Joining me is Nick Crain. We're both over at SI Thunder. So, Crain, it's the preseason. A lot of things can change. Some things have already changed since the last time that we talked. When you look at this season, what do you think the Thunder can do in the West? Firstly, like, are they just destined to be the 1 seed again? Are they destined to be, if not the 1 seed, because again, last year they were only the 1 seed by tiebreaker, the overall best team in the regular season for the Western Conference?
I think outside of wild situations and circumstances, be it a huge injury, I think that they have the best regular season roster in the Western Conference. I think our friends over at FanDuel would probably have them as the favorite to be the 1 seed in the West, if I were to guess. I expect my prediction, like maybe jumping in to the actual number here, I have them winning 55 games. And yes, that is less than last season. But as you well know, Rylan, that does not mean they'll be a worse team. Just think there's a few factors, notably the injury luck last season. Chet playing a full 82, although I think Chet playing less than 82 actually be good for his overall game. He'll be more impactful with additional rest. I just think there will be some event this year that shows them some adversity. What was it last year round? Did they have no losing streaks of more than 3 games? Is that what it was?
Yeah, they only had 1 3-game losing streak, and that one was because Shea was hurt with that quad injury. But they were a week away from having no 3-game losing streaks.
Yeah. So like, as awesome as it would be to see that again, there's probably a small chance that happens. Like, that's unreal. On the flip side, they didn't have any like crazy long win streaks. I could see them also having a longer one this year than last year. All things considered, I mean, 55 games is 2 less. I think there'll be a better team that wins a few less games. Last season, 55 would not have been enough to get the first seed, obviously. I think this season it might, though. Like, I think with the gauntlet that the West is, winning 60 games is tough. Same with the East. Like, Boston may not even win 60 games. We may not have a 60-win team this season. So I think 55 wins is my prediction. I think that's good for a certainly home court in the first round, but I think probably first or second seed. And I think they have the roster, to answer your question, to be the number 1 seed in the West or contending for it the entire season.
Yeah, so over at SI Thunder, I did predicting all 82 games. And this is typically what's done in football, of like college football, NFL football, shorter season.
But you're a sicko.
Yeah, I'm a sicko. You can rifle through the shorter season. But I would. We all have the general range, right, of 55 to 60, like where the Thunder going to finish. But how does the schedule set up? How many schedule losses are there? How many back-to-back with travel are there? Do they catch a team where it's like you play 3 gauntlet teams and then a bad team and 2 more gauntlet teams where maybe you like overlook that worst team? And I came away with 58 wins because of just how the schedule flows for Oklahoma City with the off days and with the opponent quality, and just by the fact that the Thunder are the deepest team in the NBA whenever you factor in Boston's injuries. Like, they're the deepest team in the NBA, and I think that they are a team that is you can count on to be hungry and want to win every single night, which is not a guarantee in Adam Silver's NBA in the regular season. So for those reasons, I had them up. I will say that was done before Media Day. And after Media Day, whenever Chet was asked about playing all 82, and he fought the urge to just throw out the Yu-Gi-Oh card of, I want to play every single night if healthy. And he kind of was more retrospective of last year and saying that, like, yeah, I want to play every night, but if there's an ability to help the team by not playing, and play better down the line because you didn't play, that led me to believe that the door is now open for what we already knew that the Thunder tried to do last year. Like, he admitted on the Woj pod that the Thunder last year tried to sit him out in back-to-back sometimes, not every back-to-back, but some of them, and tried to give him some rest, because you look at his splits, go to Basketball Reference page right now, look at his splits whenever he had rest, even just one day, he was exponentially better. Throughout his rookie season. And he plays a really premium position at center, which you of course know you're going to need to protect any center. So that's not a Chet Holmgren thing, but just any center. And now you have the luxury of, if you do rest him, it's not as though you have 0 centers. You at least have Hartenstein, and now you're just back to what you did a year ago, where your centers are Hartenstein and Jaylin, and then you got to play small at times, which we know the Thunder still want to do. So, with now knowing that Chet is more open to sitting some games, even if he could have played a year ago, it feels like that should be their top priority. And hearing Sam Presti's press conference from last week, where he talked about how this team will do whatever they need to do to sort of flip through the Rolodex and leave no stone unturned, even if they lose the battle to win the war. They want to make sure that they're able to have all this stuff answered by the postseason. That seems like a clear indication of they're still going to be playing 10 to 13 guys a night. And yeah, on that given night, had they only played 8 guys of their very best 8 that night, they probably would have won. But they wouldn't have gotten the necessary value. So all these things, the resting Chet, the playing guys deeper, into your rotation to get some more data, all of these things make you better in hopes of winning a title. They don't necessarily get you to that number 1 overall seed, but who really cares about the number 1 overall seed at that point with this team that is expected to go win a championship?
Agreed. Yeah, and that's to put a bow on the idea there of deeper lineups, and that may net you a few losses that you in the NBA, if in the regular season any team that wants to go roll out their best 8 players and run them into the ground is probably going to win a lot of regular season games. Just like it's how it's going to work. New York Knicks will probably see a lot of that. But I think the long-term, like you mentioned, outcome is the most important, which makes the injuries that we started the show talking about, where you have an open roster spot and 3 guys that may not be playing opening night, all of a sudden you have 11 guys. You can't go 13 deep. Like, you're kind of limited.
Very limited if you're doing that, and you don't want to just have you don't want your first experience of any lineup or any player in a high leverage spot to be when the lights are the very brightest, and you never know. You never know when you're going to need to call on these guys. I think back all the time to like Rick Carlisle whenever he would junk up Sears with the Mavericks and he'd start Boban, and it's like, oh, you couldn't have predicted Boban would start a playoff game back in January, but you wanted to make sure that you could catch another team off guard with that different wrinkle. So I just think that that's going to be really good. That the Thunder will set themselves up. Now, winning 55 to 58 games, not that big of a difference, and I still think it's good enough to get the number 1 seed in a Western Conference that'll be so competitive this year, and I think that you're going to have even more splitting of the hairs. I think that like Houston will win more games, and those wins got to come from somebody. I think that San Antonio will win more games. Those wins have to come from somebody. And so I think that 55 wins could still be enough for the 1 seed. That being said, when you look at this team preseason, and things can still change, we'll have you back on again that week leading up to Denver. We have 4 days to cover before the preseason opener. For the regular season opener on Thursday. Where does this Thunder team finish in the postseason?
Oh boy. Now I feel like I'm in Oklahoma City, and this is only going to be a receipt pull if I'm wrong, and if I'm right, no one will ever remember it, Rylan. I think that they will be in the Western Conference Finals. I think they have a good chance of advancing to the finals. If I was a betting man, I would say they lose in the NBA Finals.
They lose in the NBA Finals to, I presume, Boston?
I presume, though I don't think their path is going to be as easy this year.
Who would you think that gives the Thunder the biggest challenge out west?
Even after the trade, I still think Minnesota.
So you are still enthralled with the Timberwolves with Julius Randle out there.
I mean, Julius Randle has his flaws, and he's a guy that is often trolled on social media. But if you take all that out and just look at him and like what his ceiling is, like 2 seasons ago in New York, like pre-injury, he was like all-star, phenomenal player, knocking down threes. Like, obviously Minnesota's not guaranteed to get that version, but there's a world where if he is the Julius Randle he was in that peak season, I think he fits better next to Rudy. Like, he's an actual 4, and you don't have to worry about this Rudy and Towns double 5s. Like, there's a world where they're better than they were last year. I know the likelihood is probably that they're a little bit worse, but there's also a world where they're better. And if Julius clicks, and to be clear, I think they may actually be doing a follow-up trade between now and in February. I just think that Minnesota is making these moves to be the best team in the West in the playoffs, and I believe they'll be scary. And people have pulled off of them a little too hard, I think.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at them, there's 2 different pathways to get better. One is what you mentioned of Randall goes back to his peak, but also I would argue that like playing Naz Reid a lot more and playing Jaden McDaniels a lot more gets you better, along with like, okay, so whatever the drop off you think there is from Cat to Randall, factor that in, and then also factor in the elevation that you would get from playing Naz Reid more and from playing McDaniels more. I think that nets you out a plus outcome from this trade. Whenever you also factor in Dante DiVincenzo and like how important he will be for their rotation, especially their thin guard rotation, and taking some of that pressure off of Rob Dillingham, taking some of that pressure off of an aging Mike Conley. So I think that in the aggregate of like everything that happened in that trade, as long as they're willing to not just say, okay, Randall, you do everything Towns did. You play the 4 next to Rudy. You play all of his minute allocation. You're just a new Cat. As long as they don't do that, I do think that Minnesota got better.
Yeah, and they're like, again, they will be a deadline player. This was a money move, gives them more flexibility. I just think the people online, whether you're a tweeter or a writer or a podcaster, there's way too many people that are just like, oh yeah, the Timberwolves aren't going to be up it. Yes, they are. Come on.
Come on. Don't hate on Nick Crane's Timberwolves. We'll be following Crane's Timberwolves all season long. Crain, where can they follow you all season long?
On x.com at Crain NBA. All of my podcasting, writing, etc. is linked in the bio. So if you're interested, go there.
Crain is a link in bio merchant, some would say. Until next time, be good and be good to one another.